God's chosen ones. God says what I planned must happen tonight. You've been trembling and you don't know why. The air feels different. The night feels alive. You thought it was just another sleepless hour, but heaven has been circling this moment. God says it must happen tonight. Not next week, not when you feel ready. Tonight, because you've passed the test. Because the oil is on your life. Because the delay nearly broke you, but didn't. Chosen one. If you're watching this, it's already begun. Chosen one. You weren't supposed to watch this. You told yourself you'd just scroll past it. But something pulled you here, and deep down,
your soul already knows why.
You've been feeling it all day. That strange heaviness in the air. That sacred silence right before something breaks open. You've been walking through your week like someone half awake. Not quite here, not quite gone. It's not burnout. It's not depression. It's divine anticipation. Because heaven has been circling this night for longer than you've known. The enemy has tried to bury you in delay again and again. But tonight, the waiting ends. You may not have realized it, but every storm you've survived was training your spirit to recognize this moment. That moment when the atmosphere shifts, not around you, but within you. That moment when your soul whispers, this is the night everything changes. God says it must happen tonight, not because you're lucky, not because you're perfect, but because you're ready. You proved it in silence. You passed when no one was watching. You didn't cheat. You didn't quit. You didn't curse him when the blessing took too long. That's why this night is holy, because heaven watched you hold the line, and now all of heaven is responding. God has whispered your name into the ears of angels. Not tomorrow, not next month, tonight. He's unlocking what's been hidden, releasing what's been withheld, and confirming what you've always secretly hoped. You were never forgotten. You didn't just survive this season. You activated a divine timeline with your obedience. And now the shift begins. Chosen one. Stay with me. Don't rush past this moment. What's coming next isn't just a blessing. It's the reason you were born. Step 5. The stirring before the shift. It started the same way it always does, quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your breath feel loud, like the room is listening. She had been pacing for no reason, folding the same blanket twice, checking her phone, then forgetting why. And that clock. 3:12 a.m. again. Third time this week, she whispered to herself, why am I always up at this hour? But something deep inside already knew. She wasn't waking up, she was being woken. It wasn't stress. It wasn't caffeine. It wasn't coincidence. It was the spirit stirring her soul awake while the world slept. Something was happening, and not in the vague someday soon kind of way. This felt imminent, like a divine inhale that hadn't yet exhaled, like she was standing right before the sky cracked open, and suddenly she could feel it. That invisible weight pressing on her chest, not heavy like sorrow, but holy like oil. Something was descending, not to crush her, but to anoint her. She closed her eyes, and she heard it, not with her ears, but her spirit. Clear, direct, unmistakable. It must happen tonight. It didn't make sense, not in the natural. There were no meetings planned, no breakthroughs scheduled, no new emails. Nothing looked different, but in the spirit, everything was different. This wasn't a new word, it was a fulfilled one. And somewhere deep in her soul, where all the old prayers still echoed, she knew this wasn't the beginning of something. It was the activation of everything. The visions she had buried, the gifts she hid because no one believed her, the silent obedience when no one clapped, the whispers to keep going when the road disappeared. God had been watching, God had been listening, and tonight, heaven had moved. She thought of how many nights she'd cried herself to sleep, how many times she asked God, when is it my time? And now, like thunder behind her ribs, he was answering, now, it's time. It must happen tonight. She began to tremble. Not from fear, but recognition. This was the stirring before the shift. The moment the caterpillar breaks open the cocoon. The second the prison door creaks open and Joseph hears his name. It didn't come with applause. It came with stillness, with clarity, with weight. She didn't need anyone to confirm it. She felt it. She knew it. It was already in motion. And maybe no one else would understand. Maybe no one else would see the glow forming in her eyes. But she would walk through this night, knowing she was not forgotten. She was not behind. And this wasn't a dream. It was a divine appointment, and it was right on time. Part 2. The night you were remembered. She didn't know why the memories were surfacing again. Not the good ones, the heavy ones. The ones with no closure. The job that let her go after she gave them everything. The relationship that promised forever, then disappeared when she needed someone the most. The prayer she whispered in the bathroom mirror when no one could hear her cry. Why now? Why tonight? She sat in the quiet, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. And then it came a sentence, uninvited, but undeniable. Heaven remembers what the world forgot. And suddenly, the memories weren't just pain. They were evidence. Every invisible act of faith, every moment she chose to believe when she had no reason to, every time she gave when she had barely enough for herself, every yes she whispered to God when no one else saw the cost. She thought they had vanished into silence, but heaven was keeping record. Every tear she cried in secret was collected. Every battle she fought in silence was counted. Every night she said, I trust you, while shaking was witnessed. It hit her like a holy wave. God hadn't forgotten. While people were busy scrolling past her, while her phone stayed quiet, while the applause went to someone else, heaven was watching. And tonight, heaven was responding, not with words, but with movement. There was no more in due time. There was no more someday. Tonight, the record was being read. Tonight, the verdict was being released. Tonight, her name was being spoken in rooms she hadn't even entered yet. This is the night, the Spirit whispered, when I remind the earth of what I've always known about you. She had been praying for a breakthrough, but God was giving her something deeper remembrance. It wasn't about being seen by people. It was about being known by heaven, and that was better than recognition. That was better than revenge. That was better than being proved right. This was divine vindication, and it didn't need an audience, just obedience. She closed her eyes. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't need to say anything, because heaven already knew. And suddenly, the ache in her chest lifted. The shame that clung to her like smoke gone. The heaviness in her shoulders lifted, because she realized this wasn't just the night her situation changed. This was the night she was remembered. Part 3. When God says enough. She didn't expect the shift to feel like peace. She thought it would come with thunder, with applause, with some loud, obvious miracle. But instead, it came like a still wind in her chest, a whisper that settled her bones, and a holy finality that echoed like a gavel striking the courtroom of heaven. Enough. That's all God said, and that one word unraveled the chains that had wrapped around her for years. For the first time in forever, she wasn't begging, she wasn't pleading, she wasn't straining to be heard. She was still, she was ready, she was in alignment, because something had shifted, not around her, but above her, in the spirit. There was a sound, a closing, a verdict. The case had been open for too long. The warfare, the delays, the false starts, the unanswered calls, the almosts that always turned into not yets. But tonight, the judge stood up, and when God says enough, hell has no rebuttal, delay has no argument, and the enemy has no case to make. She didn't realize how long she had been surviving, fighting to stay afloat while pretending she was fine. But God saw it all. The nights she fell asleep praying for direction, the mornings she showed up anyway, even when everything in her said to quit. the moments she kept giving when she had nothing left. And now, heaven wasn't just applauding her faith, it was enforcing it. Tonight wasn't emotional, it was legal. Something was being released. Something was being finalized. Something was being transferred into her hands. She felt it before she could even describe it. That weight of false guilt lifted. That subtle self-doubt shattered. The chains of not enough had just been broken, and God himself had declared, "It's over. You passed. It's time." She could feel the authority rise in her. Not pride placement, not noise knowing. The same spirit that raised Esther to the throne. The same favor that took Joseph from prisoner to prince. The same fire that defended Daniel in the den was now activated in her, and nothing, no rejection, no delay, no trauma could stop it now. God wasn't just saying enough to her pain. He was saying enough to the world's grip on her story. "She's mine," he declared. "Let her go." She didn't shout. She didn't post it online. She didn't need validation, because deep down, she knew this wasn't the night she escaped. This was the night she took her seat. Part 4. The unseen glow. She didn't see it at first. How could she? She'd spent so long looking tired, feeling invisible, shrinking just to survive the room. She was used to silence, to being overlooked, to walking into places where no one turned around. But something had changed, and it wasn't just spiritual. It was visible, palpable. The cashier smiled longer than usual. The stranger at the cafe gave her their seat without a word. Even the air felt warmer around her, like the world finally recognized what heaven had already declared. She caught her reflection in the window glass. Not vanity, not ego, just awe. She looked the same, but she wasn't the same. There was a glow now, and it didn't come from highlighters or good sleep. It came from God. This was the part they never talk about. Not the miracle, not the breakthrough, but the after the becoming. The part when obedience leaves a fragrance, when scars don't just heal, they shine. When the soul begins to leak light through every pore of your being. She hadn't even realized it, but people had started treating her differently, not out of fear, out of reverence. Because even if they couldn't name it, they could feel it. She had been with God. This wasn't pride. This wasn't image. It was evidence. Evidence that she had gone through the fire and didn't smell like smoke. Evidence that she had been pressed, but not crushed. That she had been hidden, not forgotten. That her strength was made of silence and sacrifice. And now, her light could no longer be dimmed. They didn't know what to call it. They said, "You're glowing." She smiled, but in her spirit, she whispered back, "It's the glory." This glow wasn't cosmetic. It was cosmic. It was the light of alignment, of restored confidence, of someone who had been remembered by heaven and marked by fire. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. She didn't need to beg to be seen. She didn't even need closure from those who walked away. Because now, her presence answered what her words never could. She had stepped into radiance. Not the world's kind. God's kind. They'd ask her soon, what changed? What happened? And she would answer the only way she knew how. I stayed faithful, and heaven found me. Part 5. The night heaven called you blessed. She didn't ask for this. Not the calling, not the weight, not the cost of being set apart. All she ever really wanted was peace, to be loved deeply, to be safe, to matter without needing to perform. But God, he saw something deeper, and while the world handed out applause to the loudest ones in the room, he was crafting a crown in the dark just for her. It wasn't the kind of night she expected to be remembered. There were no fireworks, no posts, no congratulations, just stillness, a breath, and a sacred hush in her spirit. She felt it before she heard it, the echo from realms unseen. She's the one. Call her blessed. And in that moment, heaven wasn't rewarding her results. Heaven was responding to her resilience. to the nights she worshipped with a shattered heart, to the days she kept sowing kindness with empty hands, to the choices no one clapped for but angels recorded. You are blessed, not just because you're receiving, but because you endured. Blessed is the woman who didn't lose her softness, even after betrayal. Blessed is the man who still forgave, even when it cost him everything. Blessed are the ones who stayed planted, when every storm tried to uproot them. And tonight, they're rising. The shift wasn't just circumstantial, it was positional. God wasn't just giving her a blessing, He was making her one. A vessel, a voice, a beacon, the kind of light that wakes others up, the kind of presence that shakes atmospheres, the kind of walk that makes darkness nervous. She was now carrying answers inside her, not theories, testimonies, not borrowed words, authority, the kind you can't fake, the kind that only comes when you've bled in private and still chose light. And now, heaven was confirming what hell had tried to erase. This is the one, marked, molded, matured, my daughter, my son, my remnant. The floodgates opened not just over her, but through her. She looked around, realizing it wasn't just about breakthrough anymore. This was about legacy, the kind that heals bloodlines, the kind that breaks generational curses, the kind that shifts futures. This was the night heaven didn't just call her free, heaven called her blessed, and it would never be reversed. You were chosen before tonight. You thought you were waiting on God, but all this time, God was waiting on you to survive the fire, to trust Him in the silence, to walk by faith, even when your eyes saw nothing but delay. And you did. You passed without cheating. You believed when you had every reason to quit. You loved even after betrayal. You prayed even when the heavens felt closed. You didn't just pass the test. You won God's heart. Tonight wasn't random. It was a prophetic fulfillment, an ancient appointment written long before you were born. You didn't just step into a breakthrough, you stepped into your name in the Spirit, and heaven called you what you've always been: blessed, anointed, chosen. Do you feel it now? That stillness in your chest, that quiet confidence that doesn't need proof.
That's not adrenaline.
That's not hope. That's confirmation. Heaven is no longer silent. The Spirit inside you has stood up. You've crossed over, and the oil is flowing. You are not the same. So let me leave you with one truth. Chosen one, you were never forgotten. Not for a second. Not in the waiting. Not in the breaking. And especially not in the becoming. You were hidden to be revealed. You were delayed to be prepared. You were denied to be divinely positioned. And now, your light can't be ignored. If this stirred something in your spirit, if you felt seen, remembered, or awakened in any way, then this moment was written for you. Not coincidence. Confirmation. Type 7 in the comments to seal this in faith. Let heaven, the angels, and every watching force know you heard the call. You felt the shift, and you're ready. Tag someone you know is chosen too. Because when the remnant rises, they rise together.